Experience work interactions in a different and refreshing light. This is the Leader in You podcast, brought to you by EmC Leaders, taking care of the teams you care about. We bring the science of attachment and emotional connection with insight from the last 20 years to share how you can overcome conflict issues at work and build strong team relationships, as well as the connected culture. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Leader in You podcast. My name is Dr. Lola Gershfeld. Today, I am joined by a wonderful guest, wonderful colleague, Niamh Hannan, our EmC trainer in Ireland. I'm here without Paulina today, but it's nice to have you, Niamh. Welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm really delighted to be here.
We just came back from the conference. This is our second week from the conference, and I'm still so energized by talking to people, by sharing this wonderful, wonderful experience with them, and sharing this amazing process. So, Niamh, you just did a 2-day training not too long ago. I know it's been a month, but it feels like just around the corner. You did a 2-day EmC masterclass, and I'd love to hear your experience and how you felt leading that 2-day training.
Yeah, so this one was rather than being in a company, which would be our norm, I opened this up to the public for individuals who were interested in learning the approach. So there were a mix of coaches and senior leaders from organizations who came kind of off their own back. And we had just a lovely group of people who were really open and curious and receptive, and engaged really well. Every time I do it, I probably do it slightly differently in this, because you still learn every time. And definitely I've been making more space for interaction. I think my ideal would be to have 3 full days with people in person, because you want to have people have as much practice at this as possible and as much interaction as possible. We all learn by practice, and that kind of experiential learning is really important, which is why having it in person is so enjoyable. So for the 2 days, I do a follow-up session as well online. So they're going to have their follow-up session later this week. But they got on brilliantly, and I did a couple of live demos with them. So they volunteered and brought their own kind of situations. They practiced with each other as well. So yeah, a huge amount of the learning is kind of understanding the theory behind it and the science behind it, because that helps, I think, our conscious mind to kind of relax and make sense of why this is important. And then once the conscious mind can kind of relax, it's like, right, let's get into it now and learn the process, and so that you can go out to the world and use this. And everybody that I have trained or worked with in this wants it not just for their workplace, but also for their family life and their personal life at home. Because
That's true.
it's,
I find the same thing.
yeah, like these emotional skills are needed in every relationship that we come across. Um, and yet people don't have these emotional skills. We don't know what to do when we're feeling disconnected, when we're, you know, feeling hurt, or feeling offended by something somebody has said or put upon or slighted in some way. People really don't have those skills. So it's an amazing thing that you've brought out to the world, Lola, to share these skills, and teach people how to handle disconnections and how to reconnect safely.
Thank you, Niamh. And I think you're very courageous to bring that out in Ireland, out of all the places, right? And I'm curious, how do people in Ireland respond to these emotional experiences?
I guess no matter what country or culture you're working with, emotions are universal, and our need as a human being, we're wired for connection. So we all have different communication patterns, maybe according to our own culture, our own society we've been brought up in, and the Irish certainly have their own ways of going about things. And yet like there's so much of this that's universal, I think, as well, that we universally struggle with emotions. We universally need a language to communicate more effectively when emotions are involved. Like in Ireland, I think a lot of the culture actually is quite probably, I don't want to be unfair or to stereotype in any way, but indirect. We're quite indirect in our communication style, and that can result then when there are difficulties that can result in passive aggressive communication or behavior, um, rather than probably more so than like aggression or assertiveness. You'd see the passive aggressive kind of style happening where people kind of try and keep maybe a professional veneer on top, but they're still fuming underneath. So they'll still be, polite and friendly in the workplace. You might get the sarcasm coming out, or they'll go off to the water cooler and talk about you with somebody else. So, but I think I think that happens in regardless of what country you're in. So maybe I was just lucky with the group who selected to come, for this particular training, but anybody I've trained so far has been open and receptive, and it's been really interesting to get their feedback, because even those 3 layers of emotions, that worksheet is so powerful for people to not have to, because and it's interesting because I've worked a lot with emotional intelligence with leaders as well, and I use a particular assessment, the EQ 2.0. But a lot of the time our emotional intelligence is measured on our ability to be aware of our emotions, to regulate our emotions, and to express our emotions. Very few people have all those skills, and people are usually kind of imbalanced in those skills. And yet we're supposed to just have this emotional language, which most people don't. We don't have the names for the emotions. We don't have the wide range. We can't articulate, and we don't have the expression. So this simple list with your surface emotions, your softer emotions, and your primary emotions, it really gives people a language and a safe structure. So rather than having to pick something fluffy out of the sky, it's like, you've got your checklist. Well, how am I feeling? What was going on for me when I was triggered? And you're helping them to move through that. And that really gives people, of all ages and stages and of all cultures, just a toolbox to be able to identify what's going on for themselves, raise their own emotional awareness, but also then very easily express that this is what was going on for me when I was triggered, or when I felt that disconnect happening.
I remember as you were talking, I was thinking about one training session I did with a group of people, and I gave them that list of emotions, and I told them, think of a trigger that recently happened for you, maybe not so recently, but it's still on your mind, and identify all the emotions that you felt, and then draw an image. And I saw through that process expansion of their eyes got bigger because they never experienced that there's so many emotions they felt in that moment. So that was a really big aha moment that I saw. So as you think about this group, what stands out to you the most? Is it the energy, the growth, the connections that were formed yeah, at that training?
Yeah, I think it's a very powerful thing to do together. So even though in this particular group, they weren't a team, they were coming from all different kind of backgrounds and parts of the country. There's a cohesion that happens in the group over the 2 days, because working on this kind of subject matter, and it brings you into that more vulnerable space without you necessarily having to tell too much about your personal life. You don't have to go into the content. It's not therapy in any kind of way, but it brings people into a safe space where they're opening up a little bit to and allowing themselves to be vulnerable and going into some of the emotions that they're experiencing, or maybe talking in pairs about a disconnect that they've experienced or when they've been triggered, and then going through the list of emotions and so on. And so there's a lovely bond that happens in the process, which is exactly what it's designed to do. It's designed to help people to bond emotionally and to connect. And the design is for maybe two people who feel disconnected, but even for strangers to come into a training room together, that bond is created. There's a safety created where they would go, and I've seen it happen, like in that group where they allow themselves to maybe go deeper than they would in a normal conversation, and they feel better about it too and about themselves as a result of that. So I think that's a lovely process to witness that, well, first of all, the process is doing exactly what it's meant to do. It works. Even when you have strangers, people who were strange to each other, coming together to practice something, you can see the bonding that the process brings around.
It's so relieving for us when we have a chance to bond with people, even the strangers. I mean, those bonds last even after the training, and they feel so much more connected. And it just shows that when we are able to be vulnerable with each other and have a structure that we can follow to create those bonding moments, that is very healing for us, and it's very safe for us to do, because that's what we long for. We long for that bond. We long for that connection with people we depend on. So I love what you're saying, because you see it right there in front of you that is happening. And people are
Exactly.
so in tune with it, right?
And I mean, then when you have a team doing that training together, that's so powerful because that team are going to continue to be working together, and then they're learning the process so they can continue to have those bonding moments and remain close and safe with each other. And I think that's a really important word or concept in all of this is the safety. Like the process is so structured that that in itself actually lends to the safety. It creates part of that safety because you're not having, it's almost like a script that you follow, so that even if somebody's triggered going through the process, maybe talking about it brings up something, maybe they're re-triggered, all you do is go back up to an earlier stage in the process and continue down. So for the facilitator, it's very safe because they're not having to kind of, you know, in a stressful moment, maybe concept of safety is really so crucial to this because you can't allow yourself to be connected with somebody until you feel safe. And connecting with them creates that safety. When there's a disconnect, we feel a lack of safety. And that really is so disruptive to our whole nervous system and creates a lot of stress for us. So this process, it's so structured that that creates so much safety that we can allow ourselves to be vulnerable with the other person. And then, of course, that leads to a bonding conversation because when we're both in a safe enough space where we can be vulnerable with each other, then we're beginning to bond and reconnect. But I love how the process just is designed for that. So even if somebody is triggered during the process, you for the facilitator, it's very safe too, because it's like they don't have to kind of reinvent any wheel or kind of go, oh my God, what do I do now? This person, I can see that they're being triggered again. It's like, no, this is the process is designed for this. We just go back up and it's like, what's just triggered you now? Can you tell me the emotions that you're feeling right now? And you're working with a live example. So it makes it very easy in that way for, I think, for the facilitator who might otherwise be emotionally triggered when somebody is getting maybe angry, for example, in front of them. It's like, no, there's the safety of the process. We just stick with the process. And then for the person who's being triggered, they're being held and contained in a very safe way to experience and be made aware of and kind of become aware of themselves even through the process as to what happens then when they get triggered. What is it that sets them off? What is it that's in the relationship and in that negative cycle that triggers them, and then how they might trigger the other person accordingly as well. So there's so much learning about yourself and about the other in the whole process, but that safety allows for that learning to happen. Without that safety, we shut down, really. We can't learn and grow because we have to feel safe. We have to be on solid ground before we can learn and grow.
I love that terminology, the solid ground, because It feels so comfortable when we are on solid ground and when we know as a manager, as a facilitator, as the coach, or even a team member, when we have something to stand on, we are solid, we're in balance, we can hold that space, we are no longer anxious in that experience. So it becomes emotion actually becomes not threatening for us to feel because we know how to guide. I remember working with this particular team, and she said, once we learn the language and we learn the process, it is so much easier for us to guide people through that emotional channel and through that forest of emotions because it becomes so difficult when we don't know what people really want, and it's very difficult for them because they go in circles and the whole thing repeats over and over again, and we get so exhausted from that content. Even at the conference, when I was talking to people, they said it's so exhausting for us to keep going over and over and over again. And like as a new manager or a manager who is currently is leading a team, what can we do not to be exhausted? That was the conversation.
That makes sense because, like, when I'm working with senior leaders, even in one-to-one coaching, the most common thing they bring is the time and energy that is wasted in dealing with somebody who they might think of as challenging, or where there's challenging behavior, or where there's a difficulty in a relationship, essentially, in somebody maybe that they're managing, or between people that they're managing. And it just, that kind of conflict, or even just that disconnect, it doesn't have to be outright conflict at all, and it often isn't outright or explicit, but it's so, as you say, exhausting for people. It takes up so much brain space and working time trying to deal with it. I think of this as learning a language. We haven't been taught the language of emotions, and in the workplace in particular, well, but everywhere in families too, there's a big fear around emotions, and yet we all experience emotions. They're pretty universal. And so learning this language takes some time and takes some practice. And the masterclass certification is the beginning of that, because now you have your tools, now you have the process to take people through in a very safe way to recognize what's happening in me, what's happening in the whole negative cycle, what's happening for the other person. We start to maybe get some perspective because we feel heard and seen in our struggle, and then we can have the space to see and hear the other person in their struggle, and that's the beginning of the two people coming together again. So it's just something everybody needs, because there's so much dis- disconnection and conflict in the world, and it's causing so many problems and so much, people lose sleep over this all the time. And I think that's another really important thing that in my training I'm really conscious to kind of repeat for people, is that you think your people at work are not important to you. Your logical brain tells you they're not important to me. I only work with them. We can just be professional, and they're just colleagues. You just work with them about 40 hours a week. They are extremely important, as we know, Lola. Like, our need for that attachment bond to be secure it's just such a primal need that people grossly underestimate the impact. And yet they'll tell me with their emotional brain that, I'm losing sleep, I'm really stressed, I hate this. And yet, but logically, no, they're not important to me. No, 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 I don't care. So it's a funny one to try and help people's logical brain to kind of take hold of.
I'm curious, what did you notice with these participants? How did they think about that attachment significance? How much we really need each other? Even people, when they work virtually, they still need that bonding conversation. They still need to feel that the other person cares about them and cares about their experience and values them and find them important. How did the participant really started to feel that power of attachment and emotional connection?
I think some of it is, it's really helpful, in the training to outline and help people to understand attachment, because while maybe the phrase is used a little bit, maybe more commonly in our common language, it's not necessarily well understood. And so helping people to understand that, that the attachment science behind it and the neuroscience behind it can be really effective when you give people the hard data behind. Actually, I think what really struck people actually was say that, research, it shows that a disconnect or like a rejection is experienced like a blow to the stomach, like it's like a physical blow. It's the
Mhm.
same parts of your brain are firing off. That's, I think, really striking for people when they hear that kind of research that, oh, okay, yeah, no, this is real. This is real.
Mhm.
Um, and just picking up on what you're saying there about like hybrid working or remote working, people are feeling really disconnected. And it's not necessarily that there's been any cross words or, disagreement, but just that it takes more effort to really build that connection when we're working online, when you're onboarding online, that it just happens maybe more naturally in the office where you can chat over a water cooler or coffee or whatever. And what I'm seeing is that companies are post COVID, they're not putting in the same effort to build those connections with people who are coming into an organization and onboarding. And we have huge loneliness and sense of kind of disconnect and disengagement as a result of that. So that primal need to connect is so important, because otherwise the person can't really perform and they're not likely to really engage and last in the job unless that connection is happening.
Yeah. I was looking at LinkedIn the other day and I saw Simon Sinek's post about that very topic, about how we have lost those bids for connection when we used to work together. The time when we just walk down the hall and just say, how are you doing? How's your family? Or recognizing, like, I see something is going on. Do you want to talk? Can I help you with something? Those little bids for
Mm.
connection that provide us with the nurturance. People around me, they care about me, they value me, they're not alone in this, have suddenly lost and disappeared. So when our process really gets to the heart of the matter where we can actually share the emotional experience
Mm.
and say, this is what really worries me, or this is what I'm fearful of, or this is where I felt so rejected and abandoned and I felt helpless. I mean, because I think fear and that loneliness comes from that moments of helplessness when we don't know how to address. I mean, the other day, I think Jamie Dimon of Chase, he was complaining that people are using phones during meetings and texting during meetings. So in a way, he was like shaming the people around him and his team and lecturing them because he felt so helpless. How does he stop that? Think as people use the process, what's happening is they are starting to, first of all, learn about each other's raw spots. They're starting to recognize how they trigger each other. And by sharing that vulnerability with softer emotions and fears and image and that bodily sensation, suddenly they get this aha moment and like, oh my gosh, I had no idea that I impact you like this. Wow. And it also makes me feel so much more important because I impact you like this and you care about what I say, how I say it, my tone of voice, my body sensation. All of that awareness becomes so much more heightened and so much more present in the moment. So we can actually learn how to be emotionally present with each other. How do we hold, like, I love that you're saying, like, holding that space for each other.
Mm. Yeah, I think that's so important, and it's not reliant on different personalities or what color you might be or whatever, whether you're INTJ or whatever. Like, in a sense, none of that matters. You've got another human being in front of you who needs to connect. And if we're to work together, we need to find a way to connect. And some people we might quite naturally connect with quite easily, and others we have to work a little bit harder to connect with them emotionally and build that bond. But it's just a crucial part of high performance. If you want a high performing team, you have to put the effort in to bond. And it doesn't matter if you're remote, because I've worked with groups which were totally remote and they've built very strong relationships. However, you have to, as you said, go about that intentionally. You have to make time for that. You have to facilitate that to happen. Because if everybody's just on a meeting and you have, like, 10 faces in front of you, nobody's going to just open up and be vulnerable to 10 blank faces. There have to be smaller groups, but breakout rooms and opportunities for people to bond. And this process really gives you that whole, gives you how to do that. Um, but I think that's a really important part of hybrid working and remote working, is people still need to bond. They still need to connect. They still need to feel safe with each other. And otherwise, you just see the disengagement happening and people not even, I mean, that guy was complaining about maybe people on their phones in a physical meeting, but it's also happening online where people don't turn on their screen, their camera. They don't voice anything. So they're like, are you even there? Is anybody even there listening?
Right.
And that's very difficult for both the person who's maybe presenting at the meeting, but also for the others who maybe might want to engage. So that,
I
yeah.
remember having that impact, that effect on myself when I was teaching at Chapman University. I would come to the class of, 30 students, and half of the class they were on their computers. And first it didn't bother me, but the second class and the third class, I noticed that my brain was shutting down. It's like disengagement was happening right in front of my presence. And I told the students, it's very difficult for me to teach you because I can't connect with you. You guys need to put your computers down. Please help me because you're so important to me and I care about you. And that makes it very difficult for me to be continually motivated and be fully present with you if I don't see you, if I don't meet with your eyes and I don't see your face. So that's very difficult. And I think managers sometimes don't have maybe the comfort, the safety, like you even said. The safety managers have to feel that safety as well. They might not have that same safety to talk about those things. I think with the process, when people have a chance to learn about the triggers and raw spots and emotions and what they do to protect themselves and what do they need to feel safe and connected, suddenly all that motivation comes back. People start to feel relaxed and people are motivated and start to change their behavior automatically. Like the manager doesn't really have to say, put your phones down or you need to change your behavior. We want that intrinsic motivation that happens for people because change happens with a new corrective emotional experience. So when people have that opportunity to create that corrective emotional experience, they start to change.
I was interviewed recently for another podcast, and the guy who interviewed me put it nicely. He said, like, the the question is, how do you wake up in the morning? How do you feel about going to work in the morning? Like, are you happy to be going to work, or is it, oh no? Or the Sunday night dreads? Like, when we feel safe and secure and we feel connected with our team, then we feel happy to be going to work in the morning. And that's what everybody wants. They want to enjoy their work. And the research shows us, and I think this is so powerful because we can be under the illusion that if my paycheck was bigger, I'd be happy. If my career ladder was, clearer and I could I knew what promotion I could go for, or I could get that promotion, then I'd be happy. But the research shows us that actually it's the relationships that make us happy. People are in crappy jobs all over the world and perfectly happy because they're working with people that they feel connected with and they feel safe with, and they're engaged, and yeah, they're putting their all into that job. Whereas you could have the pay and the promotion and the job title and blah, blah, blah. And it could be empty for you, and you still feel unhappy and dreading getting up in the morning to go to work and disengaged because there's difficult relationships that maybe you don't know how to handle. And you feel disconnected. So we know that people leave those perfect jobs if they're actually not able to build a relationship. So really, I mean, my experience across life and psychology has taught me that relationships are it. It's a huge contributory factor to our well-being and to our happiness in the long term. So I think, having a process that helps us navigate those tricky spots in relationships is just so helpful and so important. And yes, it can be a little bit daunting and scary, I think, for people when even listening to this conversation today. Maybe like, oh my God, I don't think I could do that. It is a language. It's gonna feel a little bit awkward. I mean, if you've never learned French, for example, and you have to try out your French accent, you're going to feel a little bit funny about that, a little bit self-conscious to start with. But with practice, it becomes second nature, and you become much more fluent, and then it's like you're at home with it, and it just benefits every area of your life. This whole ability to connect emotionally.
I remember my teacher, Sue Johnson, who I learned a lot about attachment and patterns. She always would say, when you show people how to get home, you don't have to do that over and over again. They would want to come home. And that's how it always feels to me, that this, through that emotional connection, when people are connected, they feel at home.
Mm.
Yeah. So, as a wrap up, Niamh, what's some of the feedback you received after the training? What did you notice at the end of 2 day training? Did people feel happier, or did you see more smile, more energy, or were people like drained and exhausted?
Yeah, they were happy and energized, lots of smiles, and lots of the group posted on LinkedIn about the different applications for them, as well as the personal applications, going home to use it with their family, for example, or people bring examples of strange relationships in their personal life as well as their work life. And so, yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing them all again later this week for their follow-up session, which will be online, where we will reconnect and see how their practice has been going, because that's such a vital part, because we use it or lose it, like any language. But as you said, and I think that was so lovely, just that coming home piece, that when you experience that, you don't have to keep showing people how to do that. It's like, yeah, it's our like we're like little homing pigeons. We want to go home. We want to feel good like that. We want to feel secure. We want to feel connected. So you've given people the recipe for that.
Yeah, thank you so much. Last question. What is your vision? How do you envision EMC in expanding in Europe or in Ireland?
My literal vision is, I see like an image. I guess like in Europe in the past, like over the last 2 years, I've been the first and the only one kind of talking about this. So I'm on a path where I might be the first on the path in particular countries, but there are lots of others joining in my vision in that path. So there's kind of an ever widening line of people kind of joining me on that. And ahead of me, on the path, I see little EMC lights turning on all over the globe. So that in different countries and different languages, there are people learning these skills. Even just even if they never studied the whole thing, or never, like I think every team and an organization absolutely should, but even to be able to bring home the skills around the emotions, list of emotions, and the three layers of emotions, and to work in your family using that, building your own awareness and ability to self-regulate, making which ensures in time that you're less reactive to those around you and less likely to trigger others around you. To share that with your kids or your teens at home, with your partner, with whoever home is entails for you, that those skills just spreading out to the world. So the most concerning thing when we look at the world, apart from climate, is conflict, all the conflict that's happening, and the absolute devastation and impact that has in so many ways in our globe. So anything that I can do in my little corner to help people not prevent conflict, but know how to deal with it and reconnect and not act out of a hurt place where we can reconnect. So, because people often leave jobs, we'll say, after a difficult relationship with their manager, but that doesn't mean that that's hurt is healed. I have, and this has been really interesting, particularly maybe talking in like podcast interviews where once the microphone is turned off, I'm hearing so many stories of people who tell me about something that happened. It could be 20 years ago. Oh, I left that job because of that manager. And they still hurt because they never got heard in it. They didn't have the language. There was never any healing. There was never any reconnection. And so that hurt is carried, and it's carried and shapes how they are going into the next job and maybe the next job, and over time then they've got even more rough spots and they're going to be even more reactive, and so there's a whole cycle that happens. And so yeah, part of my vision is that healing that can happen through having this process. So yeah, a brighter world.
Definitely. And I see it as you talk about it. How can people learn and connect with you?
Very simply, except for the fact that my name is doesn't look like how it sounds. So it's my name is Niamh, pronounced Niamh, but it's Niamh. So Niamh Hannan .com is my website. They can also connect with me on LinkedIn. And they're probably the easiest ways. You'll also find me under Niamh Hannan on YouTube if they want to watch any of my previous webinars on the topic. But get in touch, reach out to me, whether through email, through LinkedIn. And yeah, I'm always open to having a conversation. And love the opportunity to meet people who are open or interested in learning a little bit more.
Well, congratulations, Niamh. It's always such a pleasure. Are you having any webinars coming up?
Yes, actually. So I have one coming up on the 10th of November. It's a lunchtime webinar where I'm looking at the human factor in the age of AI. So I guess this has been kind of really coming up that, you read Corn Ferry or any of these leadership development writings, and they're talking so much about how companies have this massive focus on AI now. It's where a huge amount of their budget is going. It's where a big part of the push is going. So there's a lot of push on senior leaders to kind of get up to speed with AI and bring everybody up to speed and try and get ahead and all of that. And what I'm seeing is it's like the human factor is losing out. We still need that emotional connection. We still need that human factor. We still need those relationships. We still need people to be, and our leaders in particular, to be growing in their emotional intelligence. And so I think there's the fear would be that we kind of throw one out just to focus on the other. Yes, we need AI, and companies need to get ahead with that, but they also need to keep an eye on their people and connect with their people. So I have, and the other thing is that, if there are anybody listening, I will be doing a live training again for individuals in that public group in February in Ireland.
Mm-hmm.
So
That's
something more
wonderful.
on
That's
that.
wonderful. So nice to have you, Niamh. I'm so glad you were part of our podcast. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening and for being here. We always love sharing this information with you because we want you to experience this amazing freedom of connection, and we want you to be thriving in the world. So thank you so much, Niamh. So nice to see you
Thank
again.
you, Lola. Thank you always.
And thank you all, everybody. We'll see you soon. Bye. Thank you, everyone, for listening. It's a joy to share these podcasts with you. Be sure to check out our previous podcasts and subscribe to join us at our next podcast of The Leader in You, brought to you by EMC Leaders, taking care of the teams you care about. Until then, be well and be focused on your relationships. We'll see you soon.